Doma Sports Talk worldwide with some news from the world of boxing. So y'all know what time it is. You ain't in a rush to get concussed. Now, let's talk about former WBC heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder, heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua, and heavyweight champion Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury got the WBC now. Anthony Joshua got all the other ones. Right? Listen, what we've been hearing of late is, Derek Chisora, who's about to fight Joseph Parker, came out and he stated something that was very interesting to the boxing world, right? And let's make sure that they fathom that they really put that in their brains, what could possibly happen here. Derek Chisora said, well, for Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua to fight, they're going to have to give Deontay Wilder $80 million step-aside money. Now, when I heard that, I was like, well, that's probably why Deontay Wilder putting out these training videos. Deontay Wilder's probably somewhere working on his basketball skills, right? Somewhere, going to be in training camp next year for the NBA, probably playing the G League somewhere, because $80 million would be enough money to just say, okay, well, then y'all can go ahead, right? Y'all can go ahead and handle y'all business for $80 million, right? Even Deontay Wilder would probably say, fuck it, I'll step aside for that kind of money, right? But what that does, right? And this is how I look at this. It firmly would put Deontay Wilder in the GOAT conversation in heavyweight history. It would put him in the conversation. Not saying the GOAT, because my GOAT is Lennox Lewis. You would have to do a little bit more, because Lennox Lewis, it was the same similar situations. They'd be mentioning people in front of him like Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, like Lennox Lewis didn't live on the planet. When Riddick Bowe, they mentioned him before Lennox Lewis was ranting back then. No, you don't never, ever mention Riddick Bowe before Lennox Lewis. That's the GOAT in my opinion. And what I mean by that is anybody in the history of boxing, anybody, in any weight, 2 out of 3, I got Lennox Lewis. Anybody, all the greats way back then, all that size, Lennox got enough size and intelligence, punching power, and whatever it took, he gonna beat anybody in history 2 out of 3. That's how I look at it. But Deontay Wilder would be in the conversation at that point, because you're starting to look at, if he gets $80 million step aside, right? We're talking from Tyson Fury. Now, what some people why would it be in the GOAT conversation? Let's just make sure this is clear. He has one of the best KO ratios in the history of it, right? That's just one thing, just that alone. That's when you start getting in the conversation, best KO ratio. Now, he's been called the hardest puncher in heavyweight history, in boxing history really, right? He gets called that, and people don't really disagree, right? So you're in those conversations. Now, he has the most highlight reel KOs, right? A lot of times. You give him 10 title defenses, right? That's not bad stuff, right? Right? And then you start looking at the little things like the weight disparity, right? He has 20 to 25 pounds difference in the people he's knocking out. That puts him in that conversation with those things alone. But now we're going to start talking about the money. Tyson Fury, what people keep forgetting, and one person was asking the other day, it was like, well, was it a 3-fight deal from the beginning? No. Deontay Wilder got Tyson Fury off the couch and gave him 50-50 for the first fight. It was a draw. After that, they went and made another 2-fight deal, which means 50-50 again, but the winner would get 60-40 in the next fight. Doesn't that sound fair? That 60-40 guy is Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury is running from 60% of a fight from Deontay Wilder. And we're just going to go the minimum. We know Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, with pandemic or without, is a minimum of $100 million they're going to generate. So Tyson Fury is running away from a minimum of $60 million to fight Deontay Wilder. Right? Now, you put the $80 million on top of that, right? So $60 million he don't want, $80 million on top of that. Right, that gives about $140 million. Then you put the $50 million that Anthony Joshua didn't want. That would put us at $190 million for money that people are taking to not fight Deontay Wilder. And people will say with the Anthony Joshua, well, the money didn't come. It was just the offer in the email. Well, the money never comes. First, we got to see if you want it. They offered $50 million from reliable sources. We're talking Shelly Finkel, a legend in the sport, the guy who did Holyfield, promoted him, promoted Klitschko. You're talking about Showtime Boxing, which is huge. This is America. Steven Espinoza and those guys offered him $50 million. He didn't want to take it. And it wasn't going to be a flat fee either. right? And don't act like, all the, when they offered Deontay Wilder the 15 million, right? Deontay Wilder said okay. And then Povetkin came, and then they took Povetkin, right? For considerably less. So never the money comes. But these are just little stipulations that people try to get out of it. Like, well, they offered the 50 million. Did you say yes to the 50 million? So you could see if the 50 million was real? No, you didn't. So it's not even close. And so, but I don't even answer people like that, really, because it's just ridiculous and they know it. So you're talking 50 million from Anthony Joshua. He didn't take the fight. You're talking 60 million. Tyson Fury's not trying to take the third fight. And they want to pay him 80 million to step aside. Right? Then that's probably what they're trying to do here. There's the litigation with Deontay Wilder, and plus, wait, can we get some extra money for him to step aside? 190 million to not fight somebody. Now I'm just gonna put some names out there. If the names out there would be Kamel Samaretta, right? I'm just talking about people that pound for pound people would have fought recently. Pound for pound people. Samaretta. If 50 million was out there, 60 million was out there, 80 million was out there, would somebody be talking about no, we ain't gonna fight Kamel Samaretta? What about Billy Joe Saunders, right? What about Rory Fielding? What about Steve Rolls? What about Royata Murata? What about Admiral Yildirim? What about, hey, Loma's next opponent? Because he ain't going to fight Haney, but he going to fight Nakatani. Would Nakatani make you not take 50 million to fight him? Or 60 million? Or 80 million? Or 190 million? What about Luke Campbell? Here's the best ones. What about if Anthony Joshua was on the other side of that 50 million? You think another heavyweight, especially a top 20 heavyweight, wouldn't take it? You think a top 20 heavyweight wouldn't take it to fight Tyson Fury? Right? Now, I'm going to factor in the fact that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua are already millionaires and the millions look a little bit different to them. But 60 million, right? 50 million a couple of years back, and not a flat fee to go to America to beat up skinny legs, right? And then 190 million right now would have been on the table to fight Deontay Wilder, and it's not happening. The only one I could think of that somebody would even get remotely, where people would be like, at least think for a second, would be Louis the Real King Kong Ortiz. And that's another thing. That boy can't get fought. No one's trying to fight him. Neither one of these guys. Tyson Fury, what do they call Louis Ortiz? Too much of a risk and no reward. Anthony Joshua still ain't trying to fight him either. Right? They wouldn't call this guy out. So, when we put those numbers out there, people are going to be, well, those are just the numbers that are out there. Well, hey, mainstream media is putting out numbers all the time. They're saying that, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury are going to get at least 75 million pounds apiece. The fight is a $200 million fight or a $150 million fight. All those. So those are numbers that are out there from mainstream media. So here's some other numbers. Derek Chisora done put it out there. He's going to need 80 million to step aside. We know the 50 million that Joshua wouldn't take. And we also know that Tyson Fury gets 60% of the fight that he's running from Deontay Wilder, running from taking the lion's share of the third fight. Where have you ever seen that before? Ever. Listen, people act like that, and there's always a reason. In basketball right now, we're seeing something historic from a basketballer named Russell Westbrook. Historic, right? But they are trying to not make it so historic, because if they did, people like LeBron James and all these Kevin Durant going to teams with all these people on them and all those other players, right, with a whole bunch of good players on their team that are not doing stuff like Russell Westbrook, right, averaging 11.2 rebounds as a guard, leading the league in assists. Got the Washington Wizards, who've been calling me up to go play because they don't have nobody on that team, got them going to the playoffs. That is legendary, historic, and it's embarrassing to the rest of the players, so therefore they try to belittle it. The same thing is going on with Deontay Wilder. It's embarrassing that Anthony Joshua wouldn't fight him for that. It's embarrassing that Tyson Fury is running around and won't take 60 million to fight the dude. Right? Trying to figure out how to pay him step aside money, trying to figure out how not to fight him. And the boxing world is going and talking about that fight instead of telling him, man, Tyson Fury, would you just simply fight this guy? Or Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, get the hell out of the way. What you scared of? I got Deontay Wilder. None of that is happening. And all of that money that we just talked about is on the table. This is unprecedented. Hence, I got Deontay Wilder in the GOAT conversation because of it. Because these are his contemporaries. These are the very best of the very best. What? If after Joshua and Tyson Fury fight, wouldn't it be the biggest fight in British history? And those guys are damn near willing to say, for 200 million, we don't want nothing to do with Deontay Wilder, the skinny leg guy who just learned how to box. That is nuts. That is GOAT kind of stuff. You can fathom it or not, but Doma show the hell is. Doma Sports Talk Worldwide. And I'm up out of here, y'all.